Good morning, everyone. On behalf of iland and Experis, I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation, Comprehensive Data Protection with Veeam Solutions from Experis and iland. Let me just go ahead and present the material real quick. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see the screen now. If so, please let me know, and we'll continue moving on real quick. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the current IT landscape. We're going to talk about data protection strategies and how they can help your organization be better prepared for pretty much anything that's going to come up. IT resilience strategies, and then honestly from the data center to the cloud. A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to be recording this for availability for later. So if you're watching this at a later time, please feel free to reach out to us with any questions or anything like that. If you have any questions today during the webcast, please feel free to use the questions or the chat panel underneath your screen, and we'll go ahead and get to whichever ones we can possibly use. So with that, let's go ahead and introduce Experis. Chris, if you could, just why don't you tell us a little bit about Experis and you know what you guys are doing and leveraging for your customers today.
Thank you, Will. My name is Chris Satterley with Experis Technology Group. We're a hybrid cloud architecture firm with offices in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia markets. We've been in business for close to 20 years, focusing on large and mid-sized enterprises and federal system integrators. We really focus around a core set of solutions that include private, public, and hybrid cloud, server, storage, and hyper-converged, business continuity, data availability, and really data management, as well as your standard networking, WAN, LAN, and Wi-Fi type solutions.
Awesome, Chris. And it looks like you have a good deal of partnerships available to you and to your customers. Why don't you give us a quick little rundown?
We do. As you can see from the slide here, we've got a strong ecosystem of partners that play in the space that I aforementioned. And I want to particularly thank iland today for sponsoring our webinar.
Awesome. No, thank you guys very much. This is going to be fun. So a little bit about iland. You know, our motto is really protect business and power innovation. And we work with, you know, all of our partners and Experis especially for, you know, leveraging the cloud to do more with your current infrastructure. And you know, protection is usually one of the biggest things that comes around. But iland offers a whole series of, you know, offerings, and you can talk to your Experis reps about that, from disaster recovery in the cloud, object storage for you know, archival or scale out backup repository, infrastructure as a service, backup as a service, and even Office 365 backup. And we're going to talk about some of these things today and how it can help your organization really protect yourself, and then really allows you to kind of make that next jump. So I love this. I mean, and I'm not going to read every single slide, but I do want to read this one because I think it's very valuable in kind of setting the mission tone and what you guys are experiencing as an IT organization and what cloud providers and channel partners are offering to kind of help you make that leap. But the IT landscape is constantly changing, and we know that. We've been doing this for forever, right? You know, the same things that we did 5 years ago are completely different nowadays. Every year, there are new innovations, new opportunities, and new risks. Companies seeking the latest strategies to adapt, secure, and protect their mission-critical data are turning to the cloud to go beyond the physical limits of data protection in traditional environments. Now, what does that mean, and how can we help you? Well, that's kind of what the whole presentation is all about. But be honest, you know, when you think about the last 5-10 years and, you know, introduction of virtualization and encapsulation and micro-segmentation and services and all sorts of stuff like that, you know, IT is just constantly evolving, and you know, you need to be able to not only evolve your IT strategies to help deliver business value, but also how do you protect that new stuff? How do you protect new innovations, and what are you doing to protect your organization from, you know, any number of things? And that's kind of what we're talking about with the whole comprehensive data protection and IT resilience. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's pretty bad out there. I mean, everything from malware and ransomware and crypto locker and natural disasters, and I mean, there's just you can't go a day as an IT person without reading something on the internet saying like, "Whew, I'm glad that didn't happen to me." But if it were, what would I do to solve it? What would I do to fix it? Just recently, the 22 Texas towns hit with ransomware attack. It's crazy. I mean, some of these organizations were down for days. I mean, imagine if your organization was down for multiple days. That's not good for you. That's not good for anybody, especially your end users and customers. So it's pretty scary out there. And you, as an IT professional, have to constantly be on top of this stuff. And it can be, overwhelming, and it can be pretty difficult sometimes. And so, when you think about at the core, right, obviously your employees are the thing, your product is the thing, but your data is your lifeblood, and it needs to be protected. And there's all sorts of things that need to be protected from, service availability. Again, we talk about natural disasters and, hurricanes and floods and all this stuff. While it's not the primary reason that customers lose access to their data, it does happen. I mean, you saw the stuff happening, in Texas and in Florida, and I mean it's an impact that can affect your organization. Accidental deletion. Now, this one is probably more keen to home for a lot of people when somebody accidentally just moves something or deletes something or gets rid of it. Human error is probably one of the top reasons that there's either an outage or a data loss issue or something to that effect, and you need to be able to recover from that and protect it. External threats such as ransomware, crypto locker, malware, viruses, anything like that. There's a lot of scary stuff out there, and it's almost an arms race. It's an arms race between you, your security company, and your tools versus the bad guys who are out there constantly evolving and doing some pretty nasty stuff out there. Internal threats, malicious insiders. Nobody wants to think about the guy or girl who's been working at the company for 10 years doing anything. But it happens, right? I mean, if somebody wants to do something bad and they have keys to the kingdom, it can happen, and it's unfortunate when it does. So you have to be able to protect and recover from that sort of thing. Policy gaps, this one's a really big thing for regulated industries or anybody who has any sort of mandates, whether it's government or legal or GDPR or anything like that. When someone says, "Hey, I need all the email from 3 years ago because we're doing a legal hold and an investigation," those are things that you have to be able to provide. Otherwise, you can be in a lot of trouble. And then finally, legal and compliance, right? So this is, again, going back to if the government says you have to do it for 7 years, or if internally you say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do for 3 years," audits and all that stuff. Those are the things where you basically set the tone for protecting your data and recovering it. And if you can't meet your own requirements or the government's requirements, there's fees and some challenges. So, it's scary, and there's a lot of things out there, and you need to protect your data. So how do you do that? Where do you even start? What are some of the things that you can do? What are the things that happen if you can't, right? So it's very easy to know what the tangible cost of an outage is, right? So if you make, whatever, how many X dollars per minute on your website, and your website goes down and it's down for an hour, you can calculate that. You can calculate, lost productivity from employees. You can, quantify all of these things, and there's a ton of stuff out there. But what about the intangible costs that are associated with an outage for you? This is the perception. What is the perception both internally and externally of your customer base or whoever? And this really comes to the forefront when you start thinking about when your own internal people don't trust IT because of the number of outages or anything like that. They start looking at shadow IT and start doing stuff kind of behind IT's back and stuff. You never want that to happen. Brand loyalty is another thing. I mean, loyalty is such a huge thing that it takes so much more resources to reacquire someone than it does to acquire them the first time, and especially if they lose that loyalty. And then finally, the confidence. So if they lose the confidence in you, that can be challenging, right? You don't want your internal or external customers or whoever relies on you for services to lose that confidence. So there's a tangible cost to any sort of data outage, but there's an intangible one as well, and that needs to play into your cost factors. It needs to play into your research and analysis of what you're going to do to protect your data. And so all of that stuff, right? It's scary. There's a lot of things you need to protect against. There's a lot of reasons, and then there's the tangible and intangible. And, so obviously you're here to find out, well, how do I protect against that? And the reality of it is there's no single simple solution. We talk about comprehensive data protection, multifaceted IT resilience, all of this stuff. And it's true. I wish I could say there's a button or there's a single product that can protect it all, but there's not. And you have to protect many different things in many different ways. And so the idea is to come up with these concentric protection plans and comprehensive resilience plans, making it simple for you and easy for you to do. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I love this statistic because, I showed you at the beginning that there's some scary stuff out there, but 96% of companies with a trusted backup and disaster recovery plan were able to survive ransomware attacks. Now that's huge, right? When you start thinking about, ransomware is always the big one, power outages and hardware failures and all that stuff happen, but ransomware is the one that gets all the news. But being able to recover without paying by having a good backup plan and a good IT resilience plan is huge, and it allows for you to have that sort of comfort level because you still have to protect against that stuff, but now you know that you're kind of safe for recovery. I like this slide because we always say, well, what is your solution? What is your plan in place? And if your plan in place is like this guy, where he just kind of sits in the server room and hopes, well, that's not really a good plan. And tongue in cheek, I know we're joking because there's a lot of things that you need to do, but I like to have that kind of conversation about, well, what exactly are you doing now and how can it be improved? And so it starts with defense, right? And, while this isn't a security webcast, we're not going to talk about all the different things. You can see that there's this whole concept of defense in layers, or, sometimes people call it the security onion or anything like that. It basically talks about how just like you can't, put one thing out there protecting your whole environment, you have to have multiple concentric rings of protection. And it starts at the data layer. And this could be everything from encryption at rest to encrypted hard drives to encryption keys, your application stack and your server stack, talking about user identity access management and role-based controls and zero trust models. And, when you start thinking about things like, I can't tell you how many customers or people in the past I've talked to, and, they have one administrator password and one administrator user for the entire organization that needs to do it. Things like that, where, you should have a zero trust model even for your administrator. So if an administrator needs to do something, if Jane is an administrator and she needs to do something, she should have her normal Jane login, but then she should also have a Jane administrator login that can be tracked, and you know exactly what they do and everything is logged, and she only uses that when she does an administrative task. Those kind of things are all paramount and important to kind of the protecting of your environment. Physical security, whether it's your data center or anything like that, firewalls and, making sure people can't come in, and intrusion detection and all that stuff. It's kind of the core fundamentals of protecting all of this stuff. And then, the biggest thing, right, and the thing that hampers everyone is just the human element. And that's where it comes with policies, procedures, and awareness. You have people who are out there and they're social hacking and they're phishing and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and they're manipulating the human side of things to cause either the issue or the error. And so all of those, mandatory trainings and mandatory passwords that nobody likes and all that stuff is there for a reason. And it all comes down to educating your users and your people to defend against bad stuff. Right? But you can't just defend, you also have to protect and be able to recover. And that's where a solution like Veeam really comes into play. So Veeam is a comprehensive data protection and resilience platform that provides backup, disaster recovery, and a whole slew of other things. And, you always start at the very fundamental layer of backup, right? So you have to back up your stuff. And, people have been saying this forever, and everybody knows this, right? But we're just kind of level setting it. But one of the key kind of fundamental ideas out there is this idea of the 3-2-1 rule of data availability, right? So you have 3 copies of your data. So you have your production data, and then you have a copy of it, and then you have another copy of it, just in case anything happens, right? And the 2 part comes from having 2 different media types, even for local backup. So when you talk about local backup, if you have you've got all your virtual machines on a SAN, and you're taking SAN-based snapshots, and you're doing disk-based backup to that same SAN, well, if the SAN fails, you may have 3 copies of data, but they're all in the same location, and so you're basically breaking the idea of the 3-2-1. Tape drives for a long time have been kind of cumbersome, but almost essential for the density and cost. But now cloud kind of adds in a whole new cost model and data availability model that you may not be used to or be aware of. And so, the one in the 3-2-1 rule is an offsite copy. In the past, maybe it was, the secretary would bring it home and put a tape in their safe, or, you'd leverage a data warehouse with, a whole bunch of environmental cooling and all sorts of stuff like that. But that has all kinds of challenges. What happens if the physical device doesn't work? What happens if it gets lost in transit? Anything like that. So, having this air-gapped offsite copy that's very quickly available is important. And that's where cloud kind of comes into play. And so you need to be able to protect all of your data. And this is the kind of fundamental rule to start with that data protection. And you can't stop there, right? So you have local data protection, whether it's SAN-based snapshots, whether it's disk-to-disk backup, you're leveraging a tape drive, whatever you have for your local backups is necessary, right? Because again, people are going to come in and say, hey, I can't find this file, I deleted this thing, or a virtual machine goes corrupt, or whatever. You need to have some level of recoverability to be able to bring that information back. So it starts at the core with local backup. But then, you need to go ahead and think about all the other things you're thinking about. And that really is where iland comes in with this broader data protection solution. So starting with the secure cloud backup, the Veeam technology not only allows you to create your local backups, but then it creates what's called a copy backup, and it sends that to the cloud. And so, by leveraging cloud, you kind of solve a couple of different things. You remove yourself from the physical dependency of any sort of hardware, whether it's a tape drive, or a VTL, or disk-to-disk backup, or anything like that. You remove that, and you start to send it to an agnostic hardware platform in the cloud. Now, the other cool part about that is it's completely encrypted. It's encrypted in flight, and it's encrypted in rest. And it allows for the ability to make sure that it's air-gapped. And what that really means is, today, some of the ransomware out there is pretty nasty. It'll go out and it'll actually look for hard drives that have backup files on it. And so if you have like a map drive or something like that, and that's where all your backups are locally, if that ransomware gets a hold of it and deletes it, well, you're kind of hurt. But because of the tunnel that the Veeam creates to the cloud provider, it's encrypted at rest. Encrypted in flight, it's encrypted at rest once it gets there. There's no way for this ransomware to actually find that data and go into it. Now, there is the chance that there's a malicious person who could go and do that. And we actually offer a whole nother protection thing on top of that. And we'll talk about that in a second. The next thing is secure cloud object storage, right? So Veeam has this concept of, scale out backup repository. And what that really means is cloud tiered on-demand elastic storage, right? And there's a lot of marketing words, I apologize for that. But really what it means is when you need it, you can just suck data from the cloud or suck space from the cloud and start to upload stuff. So whether you're doing, your quarterly, or you're doing, a long-term archive or whatever, anytime you need that additional space, you can go ahead and leverage, relatively inexpensive capacity tier or cloud tier in object storage, S3 compatible and all that stuff, and you can go ahead and leverage that as well as you need it sort of on demand. And the great thing about that is you're not paying for anything until you need it. And then on top of backup, and we'll talk about this, is disaster recovery, right? So, if you're taking a backup at 6 o'clock at night, and the next day at 5 o'clock, something tragic happens, well, now you start looking at your 23 hours out of date from just a data protection availability standpoint, and then what does it take to recover that? What if it takes another 4, 5, 6 hours to recover, and then you have to do all of that day's work, right? So now you're talking about day and a half, 2 days of outage, and some applications, some organizations, depending on what you decide as a company, that's not tolerable, right? So you have your backups, you have your air-gapped offsite backups, and then you start to implement IT resilience with secure disaster recovery and the ability to quickly bring your environment online somewhere else. Again, if the power goes out to your building, it doesn't matter how good your backups are, you're not up and running, right? And then as more and more organizations are looking to SaaS-based applications such as Exchange and SharePoint and Office OneDrive, I've done Exchange admin for 5.5 and all that stuff, and a lot of times it doesn't really deliver the value to the business. Email does, but managing email systems don't. So a lot of companies are looking at Office 365 to kind of offload a lot of that stuff, right? Why bother, dealing with your own PowerPoint installs and Exchange servers and SharePoint servers when you can do it all in the cloud? But you have to be able to protect it, and I'll talk about that as well. And so the idea is you do all of these multi-layered steps for data protection, IT resilience, but you can leverage the Secure Cloud Console and the Veeam backup and replication consoles to give you that unified experience and unified management. So iland Secure Backup as a Service, I talked a little bit about it, but it leverages Veeam to create a backup copy and send it off to the cloud. It's that simple. Not only does it encrypt it, but it also compresses it and allows it to be very bandwidth nice. Basically, it plays well with your bandwidth. And we have a bunch of tools that can actually determine how long it's going to take and which data center in the world are you going to and all of that stuff. But basically, you have your local backup for protection, for quick recovery. Then you have your offsite air-gapped cloud-based backup, which is just a copy of that. And it's all simple. I mean, we have a bunch of videos on YouTube where you can go and you can watch, and it's 4 clicks, and then you're done, and then it sends it off. Now, I talked about this earlier, but one of the challenges with having an air-gapped backup is if you have a malicious user who has access to those backups, if they go in and they delete it, well, you kind of didn't solve anything by having an offsite air-gapped backup. However, with insider protection, what ends up happening is anytime a backup job is deleted on the cloud, there's a copy of it, say, call it a recycle bin or whatever, that's actually saved for an additional 7 days. And that can only be accessed by iland support. So now, you're protecting against ransomware, you're protecting against the bad ransomware that finds those local backups and does all this stuff. But now, if there's a malicious user and he goes out or he or she goes out and deletes all the local backups, deletes all the cloud backups, you're still safe. You still have the ability to recover that data because it's only accessible by support and no longer accessible by any user. So really powerful tools and again, multiple layers of protection around all of this stuff. We have integrated console visibility, and this is very important because as you start looking at cloud services and what you're trying to accomplish, it's very important that you don't lose visibility or manageability because now it's no longer, you don't own the box. It's not a button you can push. It's not a thing that you own. So you need to have that visibility. And so here's just an example. You can see your cloud repository. You can see, all of your different tenants and the backups that are going in and whether they were successful or not and how much space you're consuming. You can add additional storage on the fly without having to, even talk to a person if you don't want to. And then you can have historical billing information so that you can manage your cloud costs. You can set, alerts for consumption and for percentages used and all that stuff. Because again, the idea being that cloud is this new paradigm in cost control and pay as you need and pay as you use, but you can't just go willy-nilly and just let it just go out of control. You have to have visibility and management to allow yourself to maintain that and manage it so it doesn't go spiraling out of control. And that's what the Cloud Console offers. When you're leveraging object storage, whether it's for SOBR or any number of archival tools, or even if you're just using it as a giant bucket of space, you also want that same level of visibility and management. And so within the same console, on just a different bucket or a different button, you can actually see your object storage buckets. And a lot of software will actually upload chunks, and so you can actually expand it all down to see the different chunks. You can manually upload stuff here that can then be seen by your object storage control panel, whether it's CyberDuck or an FTP or whatever you're using, even your applications that are creating links to that object storage. You can actually add and remove data from here, you can add data, but you can't remove it. So again, it's protected from that malicious user as well. And then we talked a little bit about how organizations are leveraging SaaS-based applications, especially Office 365, for Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, everything like that. And, at the end of the day, people are saying, well, it's in the cloud, isn't it being protected? And sort of, and that's what we're going to talk about. But iland offers, with the Veeam product as well, again, same interface, same schedules, everything that you're used to already. You don't have to have 17 different tools to do all this. It'll actually go ahead and back up your Office 365 data. And what's really cool about that is the unlimited storage, retention, and bandwidth. So it's an all-inclusive type thing. And the recovery options are great because you can, let's say if it's a PowerPoint presentation and somebody loses it or can't find it, you can download it, you can email it to them, you can recover it straight to the cloud. If it's a email and you want to do something like legal hold or e-discovery or anything like that, you can either download a PST or you can email it to somebody else, or you can download a zip file. So there's all kinds of ways to recover that data, as well as as protecting it. And here's why you need to do that, because when you think about what Microsoft is responsible for, they're responsible for the applications, they're responsible for service uptime and all of that stuff, and they offer a short-term retention. But when you start looking at what any of the legal requirements that you may have, any sort of the long-term archival stuff, you're either paying for it or it just doesn't happen. And the last thing you want to know, or the last thing you want to find out, is that you're doing all this cloud-based SaaS, and you think you're protected, and then somebody says, hey, I need to do an e-discovery on emails from a certain person from 2 years ago, and you realize, well, we don't have that, right? And we're supposed to. So by leveraging the same technology with Veeam, you can actually create backups of your Office 365 environment, SharePoint, email, OneDrive, and give you that long-term retention and long-term archival that you're looking for, in addition to the reasons why you're leveraging that SaaS-based application. So Microsoft is responsible for infrastructure. You, the customer, are responsible for the data, especially the long-term retention of it. This is the Veeam Backup and Recovery console. Again, the whole idea behind this is leveraging the Veeam B&R, or Backup and Replication console, can do everything. It can recover your Office 365 mailboxes. It can create the backup job to the cloud. It can start disaster recovery. It can, if you wanted to, it could even fail over, although you can do that through the iland Secure Cloud console as well. So the idea being, you don't have to run 5 different applications from 5 different vendors. The Veeam combination of backups locally, cloud-based backup, IT resilience, SaaS-based backup, all that stuff, in addition to reporting and management, gives you that unified platform that can give you the data protection policies and procedures that you're looking for without having to, again, implement and install 10 different things. So, we talked a lot about backups, but backups are not enough, right? And I gave an example earlier about, you're backing up at 6 o'clock at night and something happens at 5, right, the next day. So that's 23 hours where data has been processed and created, and, users have done work and orders have come in, and whatever happens, applications have been written, but now something happens, right? And so, backup has its place, it's mandatory, it's necessary, you need to have it, but sometimes it's not enough. And really, true IT resilience lies in the ability to quickly recover your organization somewhere else. And that usually is, called disaster recovery, but IT resilience really is about the whole concept of being able to bring your environment online quickly somewhere else, because of power, because of hardware, because of malicious, because of natural disaster, whatever. And so now we move from the backups to the disaster recovery idea. And so, disaster recovery is easier said than done. And DR for an entire data center can be complex. And, we all know this, right? I mean, I've been doing disaster recovery since the old SAN-based replication and firmware days of having, the BIOS matched in the other location. And, it gets crazy complex. And not to mention expensive. You start thinking about having a secondary site and duplicate hardware and duplicate, warranty contracts and all of that stuff. And it gets crazy from just a physical cost or CapEx model perspective. And then you start thinking about your staff, right? Your staff is already overworked. The IT teams already have way more to do than they have time to do. And now you're asking them to manage a whole nother secondary site. Disaster recovery requires, understanding how you're going to get it there. How are, what's going to be replicated and what are you going to do to bring it on correctly? And how do you orchestrate it and automate it and all that stuff? And then the replication and duplication can be costly. Again, that's whether it's in terms of bandwidth, whether it's in terms of, secondary sites. And, let's say you want to have a month's worth of data. Well, now it's going to take not only the initial amount of storage that you have, but any differentials. And it just gets kind of crazy. And honestly, a lot of disaster recovery solutions kind of stop once they start getting scoped out, because it's just becoming unfeasible for companies to pursue that, even though they know they need it. And then finally, testing your disaster recovery plan can be tough, can be risky, can be challenging. Sometimes, back in the old days, right, you would power down your entire production stuff on a Friday. You'd go to your DR site and start powering stuff up and realize that you forgot to do this and this doesn't work and the application dependencies aren't there and, the networking's not right. And it just became, a 3-day weekend of sheer terror. And then you had to bring your production back up for the next day. And so, it's complicated, it's risky, it's challenging. But honestly, cloud kind of fixes all that stuff, right? So disaster recovery as a service enables your organization to pursue those IT resilience policies that you have in place that you may not have been able to do. And so, the no upfront capital expenses, you have geographical redundancy. And this is important because, it doesn't do you any good if your data center that you're replicating to is 2 blocks down the street if there's a hurricane, right? I mean, chances are if one building gets hit, the other building's going to be hit. So you have to start thinking about that. And especially if you start talking about, when you're looking at governmental regulations and stuff, and like if you're in Canada, you have to keep your data in Canada. If you're in the European Union and you've got GDPR and you've got all this stuff, like there's certain places you can and cannot send your data, and you have to understand where your data lives and what regulations you have to follow and all that stuff. And thankfully, cloud-based disaster recovery kind of solves some of those problems. With virtualization and encapsulation, the ability to schedule testing without disrupting your environment is huge. Being able to go in and say, hey, it's Tuesday, it's lunchtime, I'm going to go ahead and kick off a DR test. I'm going to go to lunch, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to tell my boss, hey, here's the plan. We had 74 virtual machines, they all powered up correctly, and we're good to go. Or even better, because it's a test and because it's encapsulated and because it's non-disruptive, it's even better to find out, oh, we forgot about that dependency, or we forgot about that application, or we forgot to replicate this drive or whatever. You make that change, rerun the test until it's successful. Then you have confidence in your solution. And being able to view it, being able to manage it, and being able to gain reporting is very, very important. And Veeam offers a single unified solution for all of that stuff. I showed you the screen earlier for recovering an Office 365 mailbox, but really when you start thinking about your local backup, your copy backup to the cloud, your replication, your Office 365 Exchange mailboxes and SharePoints and OneDrives, the last thing you want to do is have 9 different windows open to try to manage all that, to try to schedule all that, and try to recover all that. So with the Veeam solution, it gives you all of that from a single pane of glass. I know people hate the term single pane of glass, but in this case, it truly is a single pane of glass to do your entire concentric data protection and IT resilience. And then once you're in the cloud, the iland Secure Cloud Console is your unified management platform to see and manage all of that stuff as well. And that's what we're just about to talk about. I got a little ahead of myself. So never lose visibility or management. So the Iland Secure Cloud Console brings you a unified management platform for all of your cloud operations. At the very beginning, we talked about, backup to the cloud, infrastructure as a service, disaster recovery as a service, all that stuff. Well, you need to be able to see it and manage it, and it's all through the Iland Secure Cloud Console. So within the Iland Secure Cloud Console, when it comes to IT resilience and continuity of your business, the idea is you want to know that you can press a button and be up and running no matter what happens. If your hard drives fail, or if the power goes out, or ransomware locks up all the disks, you want to know you can push a button and within your recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives that you've set forward for your business, you can bring your application stacks and your workloads online while you're troubleshooting whatever happened. And so the way we do that, right, is you create these things called recovery groups. And a recovery group is a group of assets that are being protected. And the runbook is what allows you to actually orchestrate and automate that whole thing. Because, think about it, like it's really easy to turn on 10 virtual machines in the right order. But when you have 400 virtual machines and each one has different application dependencies, and this data center requires, I need an AD and I need a DNS and I need SQL to come up first, and SQL takes 4 minutes, and then once SQL comes up, my application server can come up, and then the 7 different applications that rely on that application. Like, if you don't automate that and orchestrate it and test it, it can be crazy hard. And the last thing you want to deal with during a disaster or during an issue is trying to get all that stuff up and working. So you create these run books, you automate, you orchestrate the whole thing, and then you can test it. Failover Wizard allows to automate this entire thing and to go and do all of that. And then finally, reporting, right? So that's really, really important, is to be able to have that audit, to have that report that says, hey, we powered on 47 virtual machines, everything went fine, and we're good to go. Or, nope, we didn't meet our SLA, we didn't meet this application dependency. Let's fix that now, so that in the case of a true disaster, we can go ahead and be assured that it's going to work. But that's a whole nother discussion, because I can talk your ears off about disaster recovery. And in fact, if you want to join us on November 7th, we'll actually have an entire discussion again with Iland and Experis about achieving IT resilience with cloud-based disaster recovery. So what's really cool about that is I'll go more into depth with the IT runbooks and some of the business value and the business case about having that conversation with your units, understanding RPOs and RTOs, and how disaster recovery in that situation works, and what are some of the things you can do, and some of the benefits of the Iland console, security-wise and compliance-wise, and all that stuff. But again, that's a whole nother conversation. We want to see you back on November 7th as we do that, and that'll be a lot of fun. So our focus is your success. And so whether it's just backup, whether it's disaster recovery, whether it's infrastructure, whatever you're doing, talk to us, talk to Experis, and let us help you quote unquote, make that cloud journey, whether you're, just starting out with backup, or you're doing all sorts of IT resilience or whatever. That's what Experis is here for. That's what Iland is here for. We're here to make you successful. And the way to do that is to leverage these types of tools to solve your data protection challenges and issues. We have a leading recovery platform based on VMware solutions, so you never lose your skill sets. We leverage the same NSX technology you're probably already leveraging in-house. So all of your networking experience, all of your virtualization experience, all of that carries over, and you don't have to worry about changing completely your entire workflows and how you run your business, just to be able to implement some sort of data protection and resilience plan in place. Comprehensive onboarding, making sure that you understand, how do we do this? Like, what am I looking at? We have a tool that's free for anybody. It's called Catalyst, and what it'll do is it'll actually analyze your entire data center. So you can say, all right, I've got 150 VMs. How much space do I need? Because a lot of times when you start looking at cloud, the first thing you ask is, well, how much do you need? And then the answer is usually, I don't know. You tell me. So we have a tool that will actually go out, scan your infrastructure, scan your environment. It'll also do speed tests to the different global data centers we have, and allow you to say, all right, well, if I want to take my tier 1 applications and I want to back them up to, Dallas, what's that going to take in size and bandwidth? And then when I start looking at disaster recovery, the good thing about cloud, whether you're doing infrastructure, whether you're doing disaster recovery, whether you're doing backup, is cloud really has changed the cost model to a pay as you need and pay as you use. So by leveraging the tools that we have, we can know, well, if I fail over my entire environment, what am I really going to use? Because, you may have given your virtual machine, 5 terabytes of RAM or something like that. But if it's only using, 25 gigs, you only want to pay for 25 gigs once you do something with it, right? So all the tools that we have can allow you to really understand that, along with our comprehensive onboarding, white glove service, and all of that stuff. And then just being able to leverage the same skill sets that you have on site is paramount to making sure that in the case of a disaster or anything like that, you don't have to completely upheaval your entire IT staff's education and skill set to be able to complete these tasks. So a little bit more about Iland. We've been doing this for a very long time, right? So Iland's been around for 25 years. The last 11 years we've been doing disaster recovery and data protection. And you can see Gartner has actually named us a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for disaster recovery as a service the last 4 years. And it's all because of everything I talked about. It's because of our onboarding. It's because of our console. It's because of our integration with our great partners like Experis, being able to help you through that entire process. And really, it's all about how you can recover and the things that you have access to. A bunch more stuff down here. I'm not going to read them all off. One thing we're really, really proud of is our customer, our support satisfaction and our net promoter score, which is huge in this industry, especially for, when you ask a customer, would you recommend to your peers Iland for disaster recovery or backup as a service? And they say yes, that gets us excited. So we'd love to have more conversations about you and your goals and how we can kind of meet those together with Experis. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open that up for questions and answers. I'm looking here at the questions things. One thing that I saw come in is how do I try all this, right? One of the cool things is we have some free trials. Talk to your Experis reps, talk to them about what are you trying to do. Their expertise in understanding your data center and your organization's needs is paramount in trying to figure out what exactly you want to implement from a technology perspective. And then working with us, we have different free trials, 30-day backup, 30-day disaster recovery, whatever it is, so that you can implement these sort of solutions and start to understand how it can benefit you for that. So that was the only question that I saw come in. I'm going to go ahead and keep it for a couple more minutes. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A. While I'm doing that, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this presentation. Chris, did you have any parting words that you want to talk about real quick? Some of the things that they can do to get in touch with you guys and some of the next steps for them?
Yeah, Will, thank you very much for the presentation today. It was spot on and really relevant to a lot of what our customers are looking at. We're anxious to speak with clients that are interested in understanding more, and you can reach us at info@experistg.com or via our website, contact us form. Thanks again, Will. I look forward to our November 7th session.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, and then even after that, we have one in December for infrastructure as a service. So we have keep an eye out for that stuff. More about the disaster recovery, like Chris said, in November, we'll really dive down into some of the features about IT resilience and some of the things that you can accomplish with disaster recovery as a service in the cloud. And then again in December, we have another one with Experis about infrastructure as a service and how do you make that transition to cloud-based, application hosting and all that stuff. And it's really, really important when it comes to kind of transformational IT and all the things that people are doing and how it really comes down to IT is there to deliver value back to the organization and not to just pull cables and make sure stuff is powered on, right? IT can do so much for a business, but you have to have the right tools and the right partnerships in place to be able to do that. So I haven't seen any other questions. Like I said before, and especially if you're watching the recording, please feel free to reach out to Experis, reach out to Iland if you have any questions. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on the November 7th webcast. And yes, we'll be recording that too in case you are not able to make it. But where we go into the disaster recovery as a service, and then in December we have one as well. So thank you again very much. Thanks, Chris from Experis, for having us. This has been awesome. We'd love to talk to our customers and really get a handle on what they're trying to accomplish and how we as a company and working with our partners like Experis can help them solve those challenges and kind of move forward. So again, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and take care.